is a kitty. Is this your cat? You brought her all the way?
It, yeah, my cat is here. Made it all the way.
Can
Pretty crazy.
you just tell us as we jump right in into like your journey going from LA to Spain with your cat?
uh, that's a whole. It was hard, to say the least. It was hard. It's a 15 hour flight.
Plus the airport and the travel, like
Yeah, plus the airport and just getting through security and doing the whole nine. And of course, I opted to bring her on the plane, like on the flight, rather than put her underneath because it's just too long of a flight. And it's international, so you never know what's going to happen. So you want to like keep her close.
yeah.
Uh, so it was tough. It was tough to say the least. But
Yeah.
I was prepared. I had food, I had snacks, I had water, I had little like collapsible bowls. We had the medicine, so she would be a little bit sleepy, a little bit drowsy, and we did our thing, and she made it, and here she is.
And she did okay.
She did great. She did fantastic, to be honest. I mean, for it's a 15-hour flight. For about 12 hours, she was like perfect. At the end, she started getting a little bit crazy and a little rowdy to the point where people who were sitting next to me had no idea there was even a cat on the plane.
Mm.
Um, that was one thing. And then halfway through the flight, I took her to the baby changing bathroom on the plane to see if she needed to go, and she went, and it was like bringing a child to the bathroom and they go. It was like timing was like perfect. So in terms of behavior, can't complain. She was great.
Yeah, that's awesome. I have my best friend moved from LA to Houston with her cats, and it was a wild journey for her and the cats. So I'm always like so curious how other animals do on such big trips like that. So she
Yeah,
was in the back. For the people who are not on seeing this, it's because what's your cat's name again?
Bambi.
Bambi. She just popped into the frame, so that's why we're starting with what really matters, which is
Yeah, it's actually
Bambi's well-being.
it's an industry secret because most people don't know that I have a cat. So
Oh shit! So is this an exclusive, or do you want to
it's an
keep
exclusive.
this?
It's an
Okay.
exclusive.
All right. You heard it here first. Marcus A. Clarke,
Whoa,
proud father of Bambi.
something else.
Well, look, it's so awesome to have you on. Obviously, well, not obviously, some people may or may not know you are the director of the premium documentary, The Honorable Shyne, which I had a hand in helping produce and bring to life. And we spent a whole lot of time together. And then, like many projects, one day you walked out of a van and then I didn't see you again for like a year, you know? But no, it's exciting to have you on. I think now that there's a little bit more time and space from production and post, and certainly around this time last year, which is wild, the timing, but was when we sort of all found out about the Diddy of it all and had to really pivot what we were doing. So yeah, so it's just been a wild ride, but so it's cool. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Looking forward to
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, of course. So I always like to start at the beginning, just about you and your journey when you discovered filmmaking, how you came to decide that directing was sort of your lane, because I know you also were in a lot of different lanes when you were coming up, starting in production. So take us to the beginning.
Yeah. That's a good question. I mean, my story I think is a little different because I got a really early start in the film business. I started like as an intern when I was 16 years old, basically working for free, learning to be a PA. And I was a production assistant, for a long time. And that's like, people who don't know, that's like the bottom of the bottom. That's like the gopher. You're making runs, you're picking up equipment, you're, dropping stuff off, you're spending petty cash on craft services, that kind of thing. And so I worked my way up kind of like from the bottom of the industry to get to where I am now, to director. And at that time, I was a production assistant for a company called Santiago Inc., which
Hmm.
was a tabletop production company. So he did exclusively food commercials. Very close product shots, macro shots of food commercials, Pizza Hut commercials, Long John Silver's. That classic commercial from the 90s, I'm dating myself, but the Lifesavers commercial, all the lifesavers going down the waterfall and you hear cool la la, like he did that. So for commercials and for tabletop, he was like one of the biggest tabletop directors, to be honest. So I was like, young 16, 17, 18-year-old kid, fly on the wall, watching this man kind of direct his mastery of commercials. And so that was kind of my first foot into the door. And I worked with that company, I want to say, for about 6 or 7 years. Became a production coordinator there, then production manager, and then kind of branched out after that. Like after I had a bunch of experience in commercials.
And how did you even find that company? Because you were pretty young, and this was in Brooklyn where you grew up, right? Or in New York, I guess. I don't know where the company was based, but yeah, how did you even get your foot in the door?
Yeah, so that company was based in the city. It was in
Mhm.
Manhattan, in New York City. I'm from Brooklyn, born and raised, and so my high school that I went to, in order to graduate, you had to have an internship. It was like part of the program to graduate. You had to have some type of internship, and everybody got different types of internships.
Mhm.
And I had a friend at the time who went to school there, but also knew this director or knew of this company, and it kind of just came my way. And then I went in there and didn't know anything, and fell in love with the business. The lights, the camera, and I always say for me at that age, it felt like I was working for Willy Wonka. This is when commercials were, like, done practically. We had, tanks, 1,000-gallon tanks of chocolate and, giant wafers that would fall into the chocolate to create the little splash effects. They would create, 50-to-1 ratio razors for Gillette. That would be, like, these huge razors they'd put on motion control and, augment them for different angles, and so it was as a kid, it was like I'm being in an amusement park, for work, and it was fascinating. And I didn't work on set with, like, real talent, like, it was all, like, hand models and stuff like that, so there wasn't
Mm.
actual, like, actors and people with lines until later on when I started working, with Spike Lee and got on set with Spike Lee and started to see more of how, like, live action actually works. So in the beginning, it was just commercials, beauty shots, and food, and I loved it. I made a lot of really good relationships there. A lot of people who worked for him were, like, incredible people who showed me the ropes and really taught me the business, and I was just listening to everyone's conversations. Whether it was the sound guy or the gaffer talking to the grip, cameraman talking to the film loader. Like, I was just listening to everybody's conversations and trying to, soak up as much information as I could.
Yeah. Did you ever find moments where you could sort of pull these people aside and go, "What does that mean?" Or, "Can you walk me through that?" Like, was that something that was they were really receptive to?
Yeah, definitely. The crew there was, it was one of a kind. And it was a lot of for every job, it would be a lot of the same faces, and when you work with different production companies and different directors, oftentimes the crew repeats. They find a core group of people they like to work with, whether that's the DP or the gaffer or the key grip or whatever, and they'll almost always hire those people kind of recurring. So it was almost like a little family.
Mhm.
And you could ask questions, I could ask questions, not always get answers. Um, and you'd have to kind of piece it together and take a little tidbit of information and then learn from there. But the industry, as a whole at that time looked completely different, than it did today. Like, I was the only African American on set, you know what I mean? Even as a kid.
Yeah.
And it was, a very different kind of demographic, but, I was treated really well, and I really, enjoyed the experience, and I learned a lot from being there. So
So then how do you go from there and leapfrog into the Spike Lee world?
so that's actually interesting. Again, I'm born and raised in Brooklyn. I grew up on St. Mark's Avenue. And I had a neighbor, friend, person that my mom knew, and I knew her daughter. She was around my age. And one day I told her I was working in the film business, and she's like, "Hey, I'm friends with Spike Lee. Uh, I could give you his email address. Like, I can't call him. I can't make anything happen for you, but I could give you his email address if that'll help you." And I said, "All right, cool, definitely." And I got the email address. I emailed Spike on some cold email, like, "Yo, I'm from Brooklyn. I'm black. I've been working in the industry." I actually remember the email. "I've been working in the industry for, like, 7 years. I haven't worked with a single black person yet. I would love an opportunity, if there ever was one, to work with you." And I don't remember if I got an actual response from him on email, but, like, 2 or 3 days later, I got a call from Drop Squad, which is, a company that used to exist. I'm not sure if they still exist, but a company that used to exist in New York that Spike did all his commercials through. It was like commercials, EPK material, anything that didn't go through 40 Acres and a Mule went through Drop Squad. And I
Mhm.
got a call from, a guy named Rod, who I think was the coordinator at the time, and was like, "Yo, are you available tomorrow?" And at this point, I've worked in the business for a while, so, like, I'm trying to assert, like, I know something, so I asked some questions, and I'm like, "Yeah, I'm available, but, like, Do you know how long the day is gonna be? Is it a 12 hour? Is it a 10 hour or 14?" And he's like, "Do you wanna work or not? Are you available tomorrow?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm available." He's like, "Alright, call time's 4:30. See you tomorrow." And it was like, that was it. 4:30 AM call time, and I had this pseudo aggressive call, but I was, like, in, you know what I mean? It was in. But it was tough, I'm not gonna lie, because, Spike's team is a very specific kind of team. The crew is very tight, and expectations are very high, and so it meant nothing that I had been, coordinating or production managing, years before that. It meant nothing. They were like, "You're coming on as a PA, you start from the bottom like everybody else. Be there at 4:30 in the morning." And I was on the subway at, like, 3:30 just to get to the city on time at night. It was a New Era commercial for those of you from 40 Acres and from the Spike team. I'm sure you guys remember. It was a New Era commercial, shooting in the Village near Astor Place, and it was a crazy experience.
Okay, so talk me through you. So now you step on your first set with Spike Lee as a PA, and then you obviously stay with that family. You grow with that family, and it's the first time you're stepping on a set where you look around and most people are black or brown and they look like you. What does that feel like after what you had, where you had been, even though you were sort of you were able to like get your sea legs under you, but to
Yeah.
then, you know, step into that.
I mean, it was incredible, to be honest. It was a powerful experience just seeing that. And I was just kinda like, shocked. I was kinda like in awe, like, where have all these people been? You know what I mean? Like, finally, I'm here. I was impressed, whether I should be or shouldn't have been, I was impressed because I was like, "These are all the same roles that I've been watching, right? Here's the gaffer, here's the DP, here's the AC. Everybody's doing the same things that I've been watching, but now the scale is much bigger." We're shutting down whole blocks of New York City. We're redirecting traffic. I'm just watching all of this, like, very skilled professional behavior, and, I loved it. And, it was there's a certain, it's a little more militant working with them. I mean, it's not like, not in a bad way, but there's a lot of structure and discipline, and there was an AD by the name, I'm sure you've heard us talk about him a million times, Mike Ellis, who's, Spike's longtime first assistant director. And it was like I was happy to be there on set with Spike, but I was so impressed by watching this AD work, more than anything. Like, he was, like, stealing the show. Like, just the strategy around how he had the production orchestrated, the command in which he could control the set and the different departments, while sometimes joking and keeping it light, but, like, very strict, very stern, and, you don't wanna make any mistakes, because no one's gonna ignore that you made a mistake. It's gonna be very public if you've made a mistake, if you blow a lockup as a PA, if your phone goes off while we're rolling, like, it's a problem. You're getting fined 5, 10, 15, $50 Fridays. You're getting fined, number 1, and you'll probably get scolded, but the good part about that is you never make that mistake again.
Yeah.
You know, you get you get really on your P's and Q's. Like, a lot of commercial sets you go and PAs are sitting down. When they're not working, they're sitting down, they're doing something, they're on their phone. There is no sitting down on that set. You're busy, and if you're not busy, you're looking busy, acting busy, finding a way to be busy, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, because people are always watching, as you know, like you get your next job on the set that you're currently on, and it's the people that are just like impressing you in that way, that really stand out, especially when you're in the beginning stages and there are a ton of PAs on those larger sets, and it's like, how do you, really make a mark for yourself? And I wonder too if it's a product of the times because nowadays, you know, I do find that some of the like not to be like, well, back in my day, but like I do find that some of the younger peeps on set, like there is this lack of initiative taking. It's a lot of like you have to constantly be like, go do this, or have you checked on that? Or I just walked through here. Like, why does a crafty table look like this? Like just being ahead of like the needs of the production, which is a mindset that is with you no matter what lane you occupy. And as you grow, that's only going to help you. And those are the people that really stand out. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's great that he brought up so many people in that style because I feel like a little bit of that has gotten lost in this culture we're living in where some people are a little more sensitive to
100%.
being told what to do.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, but it comes with the territory.
Yeah.
He's definitely earned it. He's definitely earned it, and he's proved it. And I think it was important because you learn to not take the opportunity for granted.
Mm.
You know, you learn that you're there to work. You're lucky to be learning while you're working, and you're in an environment that you can learn so much from. You know what I mean? And if you're have the privilege or the opportunity to be there, you've got to be focused and you've got to be ready to work. There's no free lunch.
Yep. And so did you notice, like, when you started, then I'm sure there were other people at that same level as PAs that maybe didn't rise to the occasion, that were sort of left behind, that didn't impress? Like, how did they sort of get weeded out, if you will? You know, how did you see that perhaps, and how did that make an impression on you to, like, given that you already had this experience, to make sure you're going above and beyond because you ended up being a part of this collective for a bit of your career?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I can't speak to necessarily the people who maybe got let go or got fired. You know, I'm not really familiar with that stuff, but I can say that for me, I always tried to stand out, um, and I always tried to become an asset on set. And so, you know, again, I mentioned Mike Ellis, who was the AD. In
Mm.
at that time in my career, I wanted to be an AD. I wanted to be a first AD. I didn't even want to direct necessarily. Like, I wanted to have that understanding of how a set works and a schedule works, and be able to like wield the different departments of a set to get things done. And so I wanted to be my first strategy was I want to be an asset for the AD. So like in that kind of environment, and for a lot of the positions in film, you have to anticipate what's going to happen next,
Yep.
right? There's a lot of sets, whether you're in a studio or you're shooting on location or a farm location, whatever. The environment changes, but like the steps of what needs to happen ultimately stay more or less the same, you know? And so watching how he'd respond to certain things or what he'd be calling for, in my head, I would be trying to anticipate what's he going to ask for next. I should be close to whatever that is, or I should be ready to do it or have it already so that when he asks for it, I can give it to him. That could be as simple as a hot brick, a walkie battery, you know, because I know every time at lunch, after lunch, the first thing he's going to do before he calls us back in is he's going to change his walkie battery. So I'm going to be there with the battery. So when he says hot brick, I'm quick on the draw. And that's
Mm.
like that's a small example, but that's what I mean. Like you need to become an asset to the people who you want to rely on you. And that means, you know, being efficient and responsible with what they're asking you to do and knowing you know, expecting what's going to come next and being ready for it. Especially in the AD department. There's a good degree of anticipation. If we're going to be locking down a city block, I need to know where are they putting the camera. And I don't necessarily need to ask. I need to just see where's the camera going, which direction is it looking? Because as soon as I know which direction it's looking, I know the AD is going to tell me which areas need to be locked up. You know,
Right.
behind the camera, the left street, the right street. There's two doors there, different apartments somebody could come out of. That's how you start thinking about what's going to happen next, which is the lockup for the shot.
Yeah. And then is there a moment then that you can recall where you felt like you had made your mark, and perhaps whether Mike or anyone else on the department had kind of looked at you and were like, "All right, you get this. Like, you're in." You know what I mean? Like, that moment of recognition where you have impressed somebody. Is there like a moment that you can recall where you were like, "Cool."
The short answer is no. To be honest, it doesn't I mean, in my experience, it never really worked like that. I definitely got the call, like, at certain points when I knew I was like, okay, I'm getting the calls for these different jobs. You know, Mike is looking to me for certain things. If somebody, you know, is gets sick or if somebody is you know, the third AD is not available, I might unofficially get bumped up to second AD, you know what I mean? Where at
Yeah,
least
yeah,
I
yeah.
know the responsibilities that need to happen. I might not say that on the call sheet, but all the duties I'm being asked for are that. You know what I mean? And they have other ADs. So it's not like there was a clear shot to a promotion or to you just have to be there, and if somebody breaks their leg, you hope that you're standing when that happens and can say, "Hey, I can jump in the game, coach." You know what I mean? It's not really
Yeah.
there's no real, like, "Here's your promotion, son, you made it."
There's no, like, hand on the
Yeah,
shoulder, like, "You did good today," you know? Like,
no,
"Tomorrow, we're gonna give you more responsibility," and you're like, "Gee, alright," you know?
not never. Not never. Not
That's
never.
good to hear because, I think some people may expect for that kind of very obvious recognition that they're doing the right thing and that they're elevating and that the people in power are noticing them. But to your point, like especially when you are on a longer production like a feature, things move so fast, you often don't have the time to like pull someone aside or but sometimes, it's a glance or it's like an acknowledgement of like I mean, we when we were on set with Mike, for Shine, we did a few recreations, reenactments, and he was our AD. We were very lucky to have him, but I could see how there were some people that were part of his team, his ride or die sort of PAs, and then there were some people that we had to like fill in because some of his guys weren't available. And there was obviously a difference, but like how some of those people who just were frankly not pulling their weight and how he would I could see how he would acknowledge the people that were showing up and doing it well to his caliber of quality, without having to say, "You're doing a good job." Like, you could hear it on the walkie, you know what I'm saying? So, there it's like but it's also his style, every AD has their own style, so it was interesting. So, it made me think about just trying to imagine I don't know how old you were at that point, but Marcus of maybe a decade ago running around on set and, like,
Yeah.
what that guy was like, when Mike was talking in Milwaukee and stuff, so, yeah.
Yeah. He was incredible, man. He was really funny too. So even if you got scolded, it was funny, you know what I mean? It was like you kinda had to have tough skin and let it roll off your back and do better next time. But shout out to Mike Ellis because, it meant a lot to me to have him come out on set during these recreations. It took me back to those days that we're talking about now. I've always kept a really good relationship with him. He's been an incredible mentor at different times, and, it meant a lot that he came out, so that was dope.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, so then, you're part of Spike's family now, you're in it. At what point? Because then you started ADing for a bit, right, after this?
That's right, that's right. So I never really got an official, like, promotion or anything over there, like, I was doing that work. I was also a gopher, so, like, I would fly to where Spike is filming. I'd take the actual film back when we shot real film, and bring it back into the country. At that point, you couldn't get the film X-rayed, there was, special rules and regulations, la, la, la. So, I was kinda, like, also a runner. I'd get new film from Technicolor, fly it back to Spike. So I had that role as well, but basically, I was still had my foot in commercials while I was doing stuff with Spike, and so, as I was learning more and more things, especially about the AD world, I took that to my other kind of, like, circle of commercials and started applying that as much as possible. And basically, what I got to was basically offering to be an AD and a producer for certain production companies, and basically saying, "I'm not gonna charge for both positions, but, like, pay me the full producer rate and maybe half the AD rate, and I'll prep the job, coordinate the job, essentially produce it, and then be on set and AD it for the actual shoot." These were like kind of smaller commercials, sports junkets, press junkets, couple like VMA award promo videos,
Mhm.
that kind of but it was high volume. So I was getting a ton of experience on like little shoots that I would produce and AD myself with different directors. Um, and that was, super helpful and I learned a lot. One of those was Jeffrey Madoff, no relation to Bernie, but he did all the like Ralph Lauren behind the scenes fashion shows, Victoria's Secret, all the Victoria's Secret shows,
Mm.
behind the scenes and their commercials, and I worked with him. And then Steve Cohen, Manhattan Place Entertainment, was doing a ton of sports. So I kind of had my hands in a bunch of different production companies that were busy. And then, just being as available as possible to get more AD and producer experience.
Yeah. And so then what was that shift where you're like, "All right, directing is the thing." You've obviously played in a lot of the different sandboxes and you came up in production, which I wish more people that end up in the quote unquote more creative areas of our industry had that experience because I do think it really informs how you run a team, how you shape the creative, how you're able to be malleable and bounce and understanding that sometimes as much as producers can try to go the distance to get whatever it is the director wants, like, sometimes there are just things against you that you can't control, and you have to find other creative solutions, right? So, yeah, at what point did that, like, land for you?
Yeah, well, I did, at some point, I'm not exactly sure how it came together, but I got a company, a nonprofit called the Possibility Project, reached out to me to produce a narrative film. I had been doing a lot of producing at that time for smaller things, but never a feature narrative. and they deal with foster kids in New York City. I
Mm.
produced this film, directed by Juan Carlos, and after that, I had a full film that I produced under my belt. It was a low budget film, super passionate about it. I still love that film. It's called Know How. Foster kids, their story growing up in the foster care system in New York City. Very dramatic, really hard, but with the real kids kind of playing different stories. And after that, I started working for Mass Appeal in New York City. Now Mass Appeal is owned by Peter Bittenbender and Nas, Nasir Jones, the
Mhm.
rapper. And they were doing music videos, they were doing branded content and commercials, and I came in there as a producer and was producing for them. A guy by the name Misha Louis, rest in peace, he was a producer there as well and gave me my first real, like, full-on director's opportunity. And I think Justin Janowitz has told you about this, but it was a Domino's Pizza, like a short form Domino's Pizza documentary, to be honest. It was crazy. It was like a very internal, very small, low budget thing, but it was my first real directing job, and I took it,
Yeah.
really seriously. I was like, "This is gonna be the best Domino's Pizza documentary, you know, anybody can make." And it's kinda full circle because I started off in doing commercials that were a lot of pizza,
Tabletop. Yeah, 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 and pizza.
tabletop, and it was a lot of pizza. So anyway, that's how I met Justin Janowitz, longtime DP, also DP'd, The Honorable Shyne and a lot of my other
Yes.
work. Great friend, great person, great director of photography. But that was my first real opportunity, and it was for Domino's Pizza as a
And then you
director.
were bit, and then you were bit, and then here you are now. You were
Yeah,
bit by the directing bug. I
love the
mean,
bug.
and then yeah, I mean, and then I don't know how quickly thereafter, but, from there, getting to do Blood Brothers, I know you did some other stuff on the way, but it seems like
Mhm.
Blood Brothers for Netflix was sort of the thing that really maybe was a big shift for you in your career, is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, the 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 major breakthrough in my career was when I did Future's documentary.
That's right, and
That
that
was
came
when
before.
that was when things kinda just changed after that. I'd been doing branded content a ton, which is like, short form doc commercial stuff on the internet, for Mass Appeal, and then we got the opportunity to do the Future documentary, and once that was underway and was happening and, you know, it it was a 3-year process, and then once it came out, things kinda changed after that.
And then how do you go from that to then Blood Brothers, and then eventually our paths intersecting with The Honorable Shyne?
So I think there's like 2 or 3 projects somewhere in between there. It was Future, and then, it was Rapture on Netflix. That was the first big doc series, hip hop doc series on Netflix. I did 3 episodes of that, the G-Eazy episode, T.I. episode, and A Boogie with the Hoodie. Um, that was when Netflix was just starting to have original content,
Mhm.
original doc premium content, and that was incredible. After Rapture, I got the opportunity to do Unsolved Mysteries, and
Yeah.
that was another kind of, like, game-changing, shift in my career. It was like those were all everything I was doing was a lot of hip hop and a lot of, like, smaller commercial storytelling things, and then Future, because it was way more cinematic and way more, like, just dynamic the way we shot it, the cameras, the access,
Mhm.
and the subject. There was more mystery and, like, style in the Future documentary, which apparently got me on the radar to do Unsolved Mysteries, and that's something that was super passionate to me because I used to watch it as a kid.
Yeah. And so, when we make docs, obviously we're following a thesis, and there's a through line and usually an endpoint, even though docs, obviously you're capturing as much as you can of a person's life or their journey. So it's almost like impossible to find an endpoint. But then when you think about Unsolved Mysteries, here's a show that doesn't really always have a conclusion to it. What were the challenges of working in that space for you? And then, I want to know what you think about aliens.
Um, yeah, I mean, Unsolved Mysteries was at the same time one of the most satisfying projects to do and also the most, like, unnerving, you know? True
Mm,
crime true crime shows, which are, wildly popular right now, they're fun to watch, but when you're making it and you're actually there, talking to the victims, talking to the families, you're in a lot of the same locations where these crimes, these murders, these things have happened, it can get really heavy and it can get really, intense. Again, Unsolved Mysteries, the cases aren't solved, so sometimes the perpetrator or, the mystery still is out there. So
Yeah.
people could you never know. So there's a lot of things to consider. But it's important because, they're true stories. These things have happened.
Yeah.
Um, and it's cool because it's a popular show from the 90s. There's mystery, you know what I mean? For a doc series, there's like stronger themes of narrative that play into that telling that story. So you have to have a few more tricks up your sleeve, you know what I mean?
Mm.
Of stories in terms of
How do
storytelling.
you when you're working in that space, to your point, like with true crime, like I think it's an interesting point that it's really fun to watch, but it's harrowing to make. And I know a lot of people, especially women, who work on these true crime shows, and it's a lot of murder and rape and these like most horrific crimes that have been committed. And we're making a beautiful version of it for people to consume, but there's an emotional toll on that as a human. So I guess for you, when you were sort of in this moment of this chapter of your career, and certainly with other challenges that you may have faced with other projects, but like how do you ground yourself and stay okay, stay okay inside when you're surrounded by so much of that energy?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, the Unsolved Mysteries was the most difficult for that reason. Emotionally, um, the stress of telling the story, how real it is when you're talking to people's family members who are trying to recount, these stories to you. When we're doing the interview, they're talking to me. There's there's eye contact, you know what I mean? So it's really intimate. I have to ask very difficult questions to people. And so you get the full breadth of their emotion. And just as a person, whether you feel it through the camera or not, there's like an exchange of that energy, you know what I mean? As the director. And it's really heavy. So, I have a soul and like talking to these people was very hard. So, I'm not ashamed to say I cried after some of the interviews in Unsolved Mysteries. It was very challenging. It was
It's
really,
heavy.
really hard. I can't say that there's an easy way to get through it other than, staying focused on the mission, like why you're there. The goal is to tell the story. The goal is to capture as much of the mystery and as much of the clues
Mm,
that that exist. You know what I mean? It's like we are not law enforcement, but we have a budget to look at these things and kind of softly investigate softly. And so as a director, you want to present as much information about the case or about the story as you can in the documentary while keeping it entertaining. You know what I mean? While
yeah.
keep cinematic and keeping the audience in there. But you want to have as many clues as you think you can to help kind of get someone's attention, either who knows something, who can leave an anonymous tip or whatever. And so it's heavy,
So
but
how do
you
you
gotta
how do you shake that off though? Like you're holding space, you're having these intimate conversations. You've obviously been in the weeds of prepping to show up in the ways that you need to get the story, to have someone to open up. Obviously these aren't actors, these are just normal humans. It's a lot of emotional labor to do that effectively and get an honest conversation out of someone who's lived through some of these things, right? So then how do you take that all in, even if you have the release of crying, which I think it's brilliant that you said that, because how could you not cry? It's like, how could you not be in our industry and at the front and center of being lucky enough to share and capture someone's story and not be moved by that? It's like if you're not moved by it, I would wonder, like, if you're really here for the right reasons, personally. But yeah, but obviously it takes a toll. And so what do you do to release that for yourself?
um it took some time. It definitely took some time.
Yeah.
And then, you know, there was the experience of making it, then it comes out and, Unsolved Mysteries was trending on Twitter. It was number 1 on Netflix for 9 days straight. It was in the conversation and in the zeitgeist everywhere. So, like, there wasn't really a way to avoid it.
Mm,
After big projects like that, I typically go away or go on vacation. I go somewhere, like, to just, let it all out and kind of release. And that's kind of the only strategy I have, but there's no it's rough, it's heavy. You're ultimately doing it for the right reasons, not just for the opportunity, but for the families, for the people. Like, you're telling a story that has most often been overlooked,
mm,
uh, hasn't been followed up on. It's a cold case. The police are not looking at it or they won't look at it. And these families are there and they want answers, you know what I mean? Or they want some
yeah.
attention. something. So, like, ultimately, you know what you have to do and you know why you're there. But there is, like you're saying, there is that emotional toll, uh, that definitely plays on you being in those environments, you know what I mean? It's intense.
Yeah. It's
Intense.
intense, yeah.
But I love
Yeah,
Unsolved
for sure.
Mysteries, you know? It was important to me because I watched it as a kid, I watched it with my parents growing up, and so to be a part of, like, the Netflix revamp, to bring it into the 21st century and, like, you know, do an amazing show that you remember, that's something I'd never pass up.
How did that experience prepare you for what comes next then?
Blood Brothers.
For Blood Brothers, which eventually, leapfrogs you into Shine.
I think that, I did 3 episodes of Unsolved Mysteries. The premiere episode, the UFO episode, Berkshire's UFO, and the Alonzo episode, which I think is called No Ride Home. And so those are 3 very different stories. One is sci-fi, one is kind of like corporate, espionage, so to speak, and one is a racially motivated crime in Kansas. And so the those 3 threads are super different, and as a director, I got to keep those very separate in my head as I'm going through because we were shooting them almost simultaneously, right?
Mm, wow, I didn't know
Shooting
that.
2 of them were basically simultaneously, and then
Jeez.
the recreations for 2 of them were also done simultaneously. So, like, they're not the same dates, the same actor. It's like a whole it's very difficult, right? And so Blood Brothers was probably one of the most challenging films I've made because Muhammad Ali and Malcolm X have, you know, huge storyline legacies by themselves. You know what I mean? Muhammad Ali, they're still making films about Muhammad Ali. Malcolm X, there's a million films about Malcolm X and documentaries and features and books and like their legacies are enormous. So to intertwine those two stories, um, when it's a story that not many people know about, people aren't as familiar with their relationship, this time period that they spent together, getting all those details right and the amount of research to go into that, that was challenging. So I guess the learn from Unsolved was, how to balance that many storylines, keeping the details together, keeping things accurate and kind of staying on track, and then applying some of that to how do I intertwine these two great legacy stories into a single film.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously you did a good job and you did it really effectively because I don't know what point, like, you got representation and really things, in terms of, visibility within the industry and the powers that be, but I know that when we were setting up the Shine doc at Color Creative and you were pitched to us, your name came up and we looked at your work and it was just sort of like, for me, I was just like, "Oh shit, like, where has this guy been?" You know what I mean? Because I hadn't been as familiar with your work and it was just such a gift that our paths got to intersect, and I think the way that you showed up and how passionate you were about Shine's story was so palpable, and I always like to share that even though I have never really shared it, just because I remember distinctly, when we talked a lot about pitching and the art of, like, getting a job or how much work, free work, obviously there's on the front end to just put yourself in these rooms. And there have been people who sometimes they make decks and they have, like, all this stuff and they have all the stuff, but they don't have, like, I don't know, the passion or the thing that really grounds you. And I distinctly remember you just sort of, like, talking us through your vision, and we were just like, "Yeah, this is the guy." You know what I mean? Like, because you just were so, like, you just were it's like that thing when someone walks in and just they are the thing that you want and need, but you don't know how to articulate. Like, you were just so that, and it was undeniable. So I commend you for that. And I think the lesson, I think, for listeners is, like, when you know that you are really right for something, because I know that obviously, Brooklyn, 90s hip hop, Shine, all of these elements are super important to you, who you are as a human first, but then also as an artist. Like, when that is so aligned, like, how you have to really vouch for yourself to get yourself in these rooms and not prove to people, but show to people that you're really right for the job. And we didn't know at the time when we all met the journey we were going to go on, you know what I mean, to make this film, and all the twists and turns that came along, as it typically does when you're making a documentary. You have a blueprint of what you think you're building, but you genuinely don't know. You just have best intentions, and that's kind of it. You just show up every day and do your best. But yeah, it was just one of my most memorable parts of the process. So I wanted to share that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. That was a moment, pitching with no deck, just like, this is what it is. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I usually have a deck. Like, I usually have worked 2 weeks or so building out a deck, writing copy, figuring out how the story's gonna unfold, and this process was, like, kinda compressed into less time, but like you said, I'm familiar with the story, and I grew up in Brooklyn, so it was like, I know what I'm gonna do. I've been doing film for a minute, so, like, this I should be able to do this, you know?
Yeah. So tell us then, so you come in, you pitch without a deck, which isn't standard, but again, I just think it's also a testament to when you know the story and you're ready to rise to that occasion. Sometimes I would argue that perhaps having too much lead time can actually stifle and get you in your head a little more, than being in your body. And it's like when you have the experience that now you have at this point and you have the passion and you know the story intimately, it's almost like it doesn't quite matter what the deck would have been. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Because that's not that. Yeah, it just wouldn't have mattered. So it's just a perfect intersection, and I think it's rare. It's rare that those opportunities come to us in the ways that they did. But for me, it's always such a treat to be a part of those moments because it does feel serendipitous, and the goodwill that those projects have when that's how they're sort of born. I believe imprints in what you're making and can result, and in this case did result in a very good film, in a very good film with a lot of heart and a lot of blood, sweat, and tears from a lot of people in every corner of that project. So, but okay, so let's talk about Shine. Let us talk about the Shine doc.
9 barrel.
So many questions. I mean, so I don't even know where to start. Just, I don't know. Where do we even start? Just like,
Tell me.
God. I mean, it just was so crazy how it was so fast in a way, how it all came to be. And I just remember we started shooting summer of 23 and we had plans we started prepping really. The production office opened summer of 23 and we started, okay, yeah, in the fall is when we'll be ready to do our first shoot. And then within like 4 weeks, we were mounting our shoot in Israel, which was never in the plans. It was never in the cards. But Shine famously does a vacation there every year with his family. And you were like, we have to go. We have to go and get this footage. This is super important to a chapter of his life that most people aren't as aware of. And what an opportunity and what a time. And it was one of the craziest things I ever did because mounting a shoot in Israel in 4 weeks is hard. uh,
It's like,
we,
say
it was very challenging. There's not a lot of equipment there. I mean, shout out, we had a great production services company, but just like the amount of gear you guys had to travel with, the cameras we had, the lenses, like there were just things that you couldn't find there. And you couldn't risk it either trying to find it there because we had a very tight window. We were shooting for 4 days. Like you guys flew all the way out there for 4 days and then came back. It was a whirlwind. Gear was lost. I mean, it was just crazy, but what an important piece of his story to document, and certainly not knowing what was going to unfold in Israel shortly thereafter to get to be there at that time. So I think that experience, I would say, set the tone for the wild twists and turns that this project ended up becoming, of just having to be on your toes and having to pivot and like just constantly, until the very end. We were literally about to picture lock. And then the Diddy shit happened. And then we were just
that's right.
like, oh my God, like the making of this documentary really is a documentary unto itself. We always said this behind the scenes, but again, just the resilience of the team to have the flexibility and the gumption to go, all right, we're going to have to like find a different pathway to be true to the story that we're telling to the best of our ability. Yeah, I think it's great. So,
Yeah, I mean, it's very documentary style, as people know. It's like the goals of a documentary is new information, right? So if you can bring forward new information, unveil new information, however that happens, or if your story is still happening, you have to I don't want to say take advantage, but you have to be aware of that. You have to include that. You have to be as relevant as you can be up to the moment that you can no longer make changes to your film.
mhm.
So like, the Diddy stuff that happened, we had to make a hard pivot and we had to make some decisions and we had to, make some stuff happen. Um, because it was happening in real time. And it wasn't happening, we didn't include it because it was happening in real time without relationship to Shine. Shine was being mentioned in these lawsuits. Um, his story at least was being mentioned.
Mhm.
Not him being implicated, but his story was being mentioned. And
Yeah.
so it became very relevant. They talked about the club shooting in 1999. It became all very, very relevant to what we just did. And Shine has to weigh in on that. Shine has
Yeah.
to he has to let us, give us how he feels, and we're lucky that we had that opportunity to do so. Unfortunate circumstances, but for a documentary and for storytelling, that's where you have to go as a documentarian.
Yeah. Yeah, and to just be able to think on your feet like that, it's really important, and it's a testament to the resilience. Again, I keep using that word, but it does feel like the theme of this conversation of like what it takes to play in the sandbox. I've worked in a lot of narrative features and scripted features, and this was my third doc. And one of the things that I love the most about documentaries that no narrative feature can ever give you is the capability and the permission to step into someone else's life experience in a way that you'll never get to otherwise, right? Like us getting to shoot in the barbershop where Shine was discovered, us getting to go and see the neighborhood where he grew up and just really be a part of that. And certainly for me, like when else in my life would I randomly just be in that barbershop? Like that wouldn't happen, right? So like just to get to step into this world in this way, I find that to be the most like uh rewarding part of the process. You really get to see these places. Like I got to see Brooklyn through Shine's eyes, through your eyes. You know what I mean? It's a very different Brooklyn than some other people's eyes. And so I think that's the gift. And to be able to capture that is the task. And I feel like we did it. I feel like we did a really good job given all of there's always odds stacked against you. There's always inherent challenges, some that you can foresee when you start, and some that you can't, and getting to the other side of that, I think is like, it's always like a release for sure that we did it. We survived it. There were so many just plot twists along the way and challenges. And so, and I think I'm curious, because certainly like Diddy and some of the folks we interviewed, like some of these people were legitimately heroes and like, well, icons certainly, but not just to you, but to many people. And I'm curious for you, like internally, you have the director hat you have to wear in service to the story, but then you are also a fan of this music, of these individuals, of these artists. It's like, how do you separate those two parts of yourself to still be able to show up authentically for the story, knowing that some of these people, we thought they were something they were not, and we had to sort of like come to terms with that while also professionally seeing this project to the end.
Yeah, yeah. It's like, anytime you walk into a story as a documentary director, you should be somewhat putting aside your personal connections, feelings, biases as much as you can aside. The story is paramount to what you're capturing, and so for me, it was unfortunate that the Diddy stuff was happening, but you have to make a decision and say, is this relevant? Is this information relevant to the story we're telling, to the subject? Does this change the trajectory of our story? If that answer is yes, you have to cover it.
Hmm.
You have to cover it. It's not, you know, what's in the documentary, whether Diddy is uh what he's being accused of and what the lawsuits he's dealing with are, doesn't change the information and the material, whether it's archival or whatever that exists in the film before present. So everything that we've told about him in the story in the 90s, um, to when Shine is locked up in jail in the early 2000s, to Shine getting deported, none of that information changes. You know what I mean?
Right.
That is the information. That is the story. However, when we get to the end of the story, in the present day, the information has changed. And so it's not about whether or not I'm a fan. When I was 18, I was a huge fan of Puff. I was a huge fan of Bad Boy. You know what I mean? Like I grew up on that. Mace, that whole Bad Boy era,
Same, same.
that was my thing. You know what I mean? So it's like, and Shine. So it's like that's that's not relevant to the story I'm telling, though. You know what I mean? It's relevant in terms of my passion, in terms of how much I know what happened during that time. But in terms of the decisions of what goes into the film, I have to follow what's happening in history, in the story, in the courts, as it pertains to the story we're telling. So you have to do that, or your documentary lacks credibility. After the film came out, I won't name names, but after the film came out, there were people who were like, "Yo, bro, you didn't have to do that. You didn't have to
Mm.
put that part of me at the end." You didn't have to put the video the clips of the Cassie thing, and you didn't have to do that. And I'm like, yes, I actually had to do that because that's my job to do that. It's not about, trying to shield someone or pick favorites or say, yo, well, I like what, it's like, that's not my job. My job is to tell the story. This is part of the story, and, someone said to me, well, if Puff wasn't in jail, he'd be in your documentary. And I was like, yeah, you're damn right. If he wasn't in jail, he would have been in the document. If none of this stuff happened, he'd be in the film. But this
That's
stuff
right.
did happen. So he's not in the film. And it's that this other stuff is in the film because this is what happened. My man, I don't know. You know what I mean? It's like you have to explain this stuff to people sometimes or to fans sometimes. And in my position, I often have to defend it. But this is the story. I did not put him there, but if he's there, I got to cover it because I'm doing a film on Shine, and they're talking about Shine. You know what I mean? This is relevant to what we're talking about. So here's the story. I'm a documentary filmmaker. This ain't, you know what I mean? This is what it is.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's like to hold your ground like that. There's especially with Shine's story, because so many people, I mean, have been curious about what happened that night, what happened to him, what's he doing now for like 20 years. It's been certainly within the hip hop community, the music community, it's been like a central focus. I remember when I jumped on, when I was working on this with you guys, like telling people about this and the reactions I would get, like, oh yeah, I'm doing a doc on Shine. And people would be like, holy shit, what? Like they were just waiting to see this because they were like, just to know what happened with the Shine aspect of it. And then when you compound it with all this new information that came out, I mean, it's just like, it for us, it is like right place, right time. And again, it speaks to, I think, the serendipity of the project. Not that we could have foreseen where things were going to go, but having the right team, the right people with the right intention and moral compass to be the ones leading the charge to tell the story in this way. I think I'd be so curious how it would have obviously been different in different hands, or perhaps some people do want to make docs that are more salacious. You know what I mean? It's just a different intention. And there's no shade to that, but that's not the kind of filmmaker you are. That's not the kind of filmmaker I am either. It's not important to us to do that just to get like a pop of 15 minutes of fame, if you will. Like it's more important to have something that's going to outlast us and be something that others can discover and can inspire others and other filmmakers, and how you approached this very interesting topic that again could have been treated, I don't know, just differently. And I think you treated it with the utmost care that it deserved, and made a badass documentary as a result. So
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think people should definitely know that. Like we both, you came on the project before I did. Like
mhm.
we both came on the project off of the strength of the project and the story that was in front of us. The Puffy, Diddy, Bad Boys, none of that had happened yet. So like I come off of Blood Brothers, I do a couple other things in between, but like I took this story on the merit of Shine's story because of Shine's story.
Yeah.
Um just that's it. You know what I mean? It's an incredible story, it's transformation, it's tragedy, it's betrayal, it's all these different things. It's religion, it's faith, it's international. There's a lot to learn, from his story, and it has all the elements, of an incredible documentary. So it's like I wanted to be part of it for that. What happened with the Diddy stuff was you know, just happened.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. What would you say were some of your, if you could pinpoint a couple of your biggest challenges on this project and some of your biggest like wins, like when you look back on this chapter of your career, some of the things that are really going to stay with you. And if there's any part of that that's about working with me, then you can also include that.
Oh, that's very funny.
But
Um,
honest, because I also want this to be a dialogue between a director and a producer. And it's important for people who listen to understand from your perspective, like what makes a good producer, especially as someone who's come up in a lot of those same training grounds, if you will. Like that collaboration, it's so important. So speak to that.
I mean, this when I started this film, like I really did. I've said this before, but I really did want it to be one of my best films because, and hopefully it is. I'm not saying it is, but I wanted it to be because his story had all the elements that I just talked about, and because we had this ability to do recreations, right? Which do scene work within the context of his story. Time period. Scene work, which is incredible. Um, and so we have We did underwater shooting in Belize. We have underwater footage. We had the guy from Avatar in Belize
That's right.
with an underwater camera, literally shooting for us, with real Belizean kids to play young Shine. We filmed in Israel for a period of time, the hottest place I've ever been in my entire life, and also, a difficult place to be for filming, and a place I had never been before. Way further away than I've ever traveled. Obviously, there's a lot of history there. Um, there's a lot to see. There is some danger. You know what I mean? Let's just be honest. There is some. It's an active zone. There's a lot of things going on there, so it was challenging. These different locations, this international shooting. These
I was just gonna say one thing that about that experience that was so scary for me is it was like you, Jason Perez, and another one of our EPs. So it's like three tall black men, and then Justin, who is not that, but like awesome, in an environment where you really stick out in a place that is very charged, in a lot of different ways. And I remember being so nervous because it's like you're going into the belly of the beast and you're going into these places where you can't be discreet with a camera when you're rolling up with Shine and like the three of you, you know what I'm saying, and the crew. And I was just constantly like, I was anxious that whole time. And with the time difference, like I didn't sleep for a whole week. I was just like, just please make it back. That was all I cared about, with good footage, but like your safety first.
Yeah, it was intense. It was definitely
Yeah.
intense. We had a good experience, like, truth be told, we had a great experience doing it. We had an excellent team on the ground there.
Yeah.
Our crew on the ground was incredible. Our fixer, Oren, was incredible. Like, this guy knew everything. He knew where to go. He knew people. He had, all kinds of tricks up his sleeve. And so our experience was good, but the tension was definitely high. You can feel, the tension in the air
Yeah.
there. And so it was definitely intense. I was definitely on edge for a lot of it. Although, while having very good experiences, we were um, at one location and we tried to get on the roof, to get some shots of Shine on the roof. And we asked security, and the security guy was like, "They're snipers. You cannot go on the roof because we're worried about snipers." And it was just like, wow, this is no joke. Like, this is real.
This
And
is just like
cameras
a normal this is just a Tuesday for them, you know what I'm saying? And you're just trying to make a doc.
Tuesday for them. This is a Tuesday at 11 for them, 11 AM. And a camera, could easily be we use pretty large format cameras. This can be easily misconstrued, if you're not familiar, as something else. So, anyway, all that to say, it was a good experience, but it was definitely intense, um, and that's part of it, but it was important to the story, so we had to do it. We had to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. What's one of your biggest then takeaways from it?
From the whole experience,
Yeah.
um, one of my biggest takeaways, when you're I guess because when I did Blood Brothers, obviously Malcolm X and Muhammad Ali are passed away. And so we dealt with a lot of the family members, but it's very different when you're directly telling someone's story, right? Someone who's alive with you. And so working with Shine, I think for all of us there was a learning curve there. A learning curve to get his trust, a curve in terms of how the storytelling was going to play out. I think how I sequenced my questions, like there was a lot of concern and consideration that had to be fitted to Shine, to be quite frank, in
Yeah.
terms of, like, understanding that there is a sensitivity to his story. This is not just like, any story, this is his life, you know what I mean? So, he's very passionate about that as anybody would be, their life story. Um, and so I think for all of us, there was a lot of shifting and a lot of adjusting and pivoting, to your point before, that had to happen on the fly, in the moment, or kind of like have a postmortem to continue telling the story, to keep pushing forward with production. There was a lot of, like, challenges when it came to that. I think we
Yeah.
ended up in an incredible space, but there was definitely, like, you were not going to just show up, shoot Shine's movie, and then call him when you're done. It's very interactive. It's very, let me talk to you about this. You know, here's where I'm going with this. Like, it's very uh interactive.
And I think that Shine was very clear when we first met with him that, many people had approached him throughout the years to tell his story. And he was very intentional of when he was ready to tell that story, who he wanted to like lead the charge of that. And I think it speaks that he did ultimately trust us with his story, even though, to your point, like given what he has lived and the experiences that he has had, I'm very sensitive to the way that now he gets to be in control of the narrative, right? So to speak, because for so much of his career, that wasn't the case. And like, we're talking about a time when there was no social media. You really were at the behest of whatever was being written about you or what reporters were saying about you. There's been a lot of mystery around this. So I respect that now that he got his moment, hit the stage to really tell his story, that he would want to be highly involved with that, like to your point, as anyone would. Yeah. And certainly that comes with inherent challenges, right? It's like, how do you still stay uh like centered in the journalistic integrity of making a documentary when you do have a subject who is still alive and still very much involved, as they should be, but there's also like that, it's like that tit for tat. It's like, how do you keep them involved because you need them? He has a lot of access to a lot of the people that we spoke to, but also be able to talk about things that maybe we don't need him to know ahead of time, because we want to ask questions that we want to make sure that we're going to get someone's like honest, authentic responses to. And that was like an interesting, for me as well, like an interesting dichotomy to have to operate in all the time. A lot of lessons learned there too. I feel like if we ever were to approach this, like knowing what we know now, you know what I mean? Like it would be so interesting to get a do-over. Not that we will, but
Yeah. I mean, there was one of the big learns was like we had an interview that happened in Belize, the one in front of the Mayan ruins.
that's right.
Um, that was an incredible interview. I was really excited about just the overall
Which,
look.
shout out to Marcus, the first director I've ever had who's like, we're going to do a master interview outdoors. It's going to be 3 hours, and we're going to do it in front of these like Mayan ruins, and we're just going to make it happen. And they were like, well, we've never really allowed any of this to be done here, but we worked really hard to make that happen. And it's the poster of the movie. So
Yes, yourself and Jason Perez made that happen.
that's right. We did. It was gnarly, but we did it.
Good. I don't know how you got the permission and got everything through, but
Listen,
you um
listen, you do
that
what
was
it
an
takes.
incredible setup. And for master interviews, I'm always trying to do something somebody hasn't done for a master, keep it visual, keep it cool. And for the story, it had like all the cool elements and it's just dope. But my point is like, unfortunately, that interview for one reason or another got cut short. And my original plan was the whole arc of his story is going to take place in front of that pyramid, right? So that throughout the film, you're coming back to this scene. And that hopefully by the end of the film, I'm sure there'll be some cuts, the sun would set behind the pyramid as we're doing the interview. So like I was looking for like blockbuster style master interview for a doc. For whatever reason, the interview gets cut short, right? So we got some stuff, but not everything. And after, when we recalibrated, Shine was basically like, this stuff is really heavy for me. This is a lot of stuff that I'm talking about, I've never spoken about before. It's difficult. These are deep emotions. This is hard. I don't want to stop when we do the next interview. So I don't know how you guys do that. I don't know who you need to talk to, but y'all need to figure out a way where we can do an interview and not stop until we are done. So when we go back to New York, we set up the final, what we think is the final master interview. That's the one in the warehouse in New York City. The bridge is behind him. It's
Mhm.
beautiful. It's empty, and we didn't cut.
For three
That's
hours.
the longest. It's longer than 3 hours. It's the longest interview I've ever done in my life.
I remember, because
It's
it's
like
like,
4.5, 5 hour interview. The sun sets. It's dark outside.
I mean, we
We're
had
still
to cut, I think, maybe once to switch out like memory cards because on the cameras there was something.
So we were staggering the reloads on the cameras. So like when we had 3 cameras, what one would go down, the others would continue rolling, another would go down, the other one would swap. So we had this system so that we could just continue. And like
Mm.
I'm used to doing a lot of interviews and very, very long interviews, but this was the longest, by far the longest interview ever to stay focused, to continue to anticipate the next question while you're
Hold that
thinking of something.
space. My God. And yeah, that
It
I
was
remember when we wrapped that day, you were just like
I
done.
was like, done, done,
And it
done.
was raining. It was like, it was rough. And we were like, we all thought that was going to be, oh, this will be not easy, but like we'll be wrapping up this interview, because then we were about to start recreations, which was like really intense, hard, difficult chunk of the filming process too, and like more structured shoot. So it's like we had a call time and we had a larger crew and cast and wardrobe and like period. We did 90s. It's like it was insane. It was insane. I remember, and like it was going to be raining the next day, and we had no place to like have actual holding because we thought we would just put people outside in a tent. It was like October in New York. It was freezing. I don't know. It was crazy. And we had to like just again find I found some lady on Airbnb who let us just all come to her house. Legit. She's like, we're rolling up with like breakfast. Remember her? And she's just like getting her kids ready for school. They're just like running down the stairs, and here's like 10 black men in like fucking 90s hip hop garb, like at 5 a.m. is sitting in her living room. It was just like the background actors, I was just like, this is wild. It's crazy. It's crazy. And we did it. Look, we did it. It's now, obviously, it's nice to look back on it now that we're a little bit more removed from some of the challenges, certainly, and the cost. I always talk about the emotional cost that it has, to be deep in projects like this on us as artists, as individuals. We have to like replenish to be able to come back because it is intense, emotions are high. Obviously, you have a finite amount of time and money, and this was also an Anscape doc, so we already had a distribution. We had a date we were working towards. So there were executives who had thoughts and opinions. It wasn't just like a passion project we're making to then hopefully sell in the market. It's a very different experience. Yeah, and so it was just it's a chapter that I'm really grateful that I had, but that I'm also grateful that we can close the books on. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. These things take time. I mean, it was a good 2 years of our lives, dedicated
Yeah,
to getting it right and to making it to the finish line, which is
that's right.
like,
That's right.
you gotta get to the finish line every time.
Yeah. Well, as we have to move on to the martini round, which are those 5 fun questions I sent you to
Yeah.
take us out, before
Didn't
we
ask you
do,
about aliens. What happened to the aliens, the UFOs?
I want to talk to. I literally just realized it's 11:10, and I'm like, why did I book another thing right at 11? Because I knew this was going to go long, and we're running out of time. But I want to talk about the aliens desperately. But more importantly, I want to know, like, what is in your opinion, what makes an exceptional producer, and what is the thing that you wish producers and people listening knew more about, some of the gripes perhaps that a director has that you're like, producers never get fill in the blank. And I think your answer may be more interesting because again, you came up in production and you were also a producer, so you kind of get both sides, but I'm curious to hear those answers.
Well, I think that most people know there's 2 or 3 different types of producers, right? There's a creative producer, and then there's, like a line producer, right? That deals with the numbers and the budgets and can we afford this? Can we afford that? Ultimately, the job of both producers is the same, which is make shit happen, right? Make it happen with respect, but it's to make it happen, right? So, like, what the director wants to do or the director's vision is, you've gotta create some type of way to try to achieve things that oftentimes are not for sale or are not possible or haven't been done. Like you mentioned the pyramids, which you were able to work out and make happen. They hadn't really done that before, which takes convincing, it takes phone calls, it takes, all types of perseverance and motivation. So, like, as a director, that's one of the first things I look for in the producer, right? Like, do they have a optimistic, we're gonna figure this out attitude? Because I'm going to ask for something that is not for sale. That's almost guaranteed. I'm gonna ask for something that is not typically available or normal, right? And that's what's gonna make the difference. And so when you have a good producer and a good line producer, those people will look at all the creative ways and solutions in which to make something happen. We might not have the money for it. We might not have the personnel for it, the scope. We've never talked about it. Like, there's all kinds of things that you can say we didn't have or we weren't set up for. But
Mm-hmm.
when it comes down to it, we're all trying to make the best decisions for the film, right? And that should lead every decision. So, like, when we started, Israel wasn't necessarily part of what we were gonna do. We weren't budgeted for it. It wasn't part of the scope.
That's right.
But creatively, it was super important. How unique that we have this hip hop dude who's now, you know, Jewish and lived in Israel for a certain amount of time. This is part of his story. What an opportunity. How could we pass up the opportunity to capturing that?
Yeah.
You Well, visually and just to take the audience there as part of the story. Let's be premium. Let's go the
Yeah.
real route, let's go all the way there. So to answer your question, that's what it is. It's like the ability to accomplish things, get things done, and make them happen. Without obviously there's going to be certain rules, there's going to be regulations, there's going to be limitations, but creatively, can we find a solution to get me what I'm asking for the sake of the film? Can you make it happen as the producer?
Yeah. And to that end, when the answer is yes, it's always it's a yes, but here's what we have to potentially give up to make that happen, right? Like, yes, we can go to Israel, but we're going to lose X amount of days of what we thought could be XYZ. Are we cool with that? How is that going to compromise the creative, right? And sometimes you don't have that answer yet. Like, the director may not know, but it's like, we don't know, but I'll figure out a way to still get what I need and get us where we're headed. But I know this is going to be an important piece, right? And I think it's discerning that, because there is a world where some directors could have said, oh, I just would be dope to go to this place because it's cool and I want that experience for myself. Versus, again, are you in service of the story, or are you going to do what's best for the film? I've certainly worked with some directors like that who don't have that front and center. And I think that's where you sometimes have to be the adult in the room and the perceived hard ass, to be like, we can't do that. And not only we shouldn't, because it's not going to service us and it's going to cost us in ways that we cannot replenish. Whereas with this, there were ways to replenish the loss, quote unquote, of getting to do this big unexpected trip up front that was expensive, that was far, that was dangerous, that required so many resources, like insane amount. And it cut into a large part of our budget for other things. But in the end, it was the right decision,
Definitely. And I don't remember what it was, but you said, like, we have, X amount of recreation days. So this Israel trip, just so you know, you were telling
Yep.
me, going to cost us this many days will then go away. You will not be able to do recreations for as many days and that's like a conversation that we have to have. You're not telling me no, but you're saying this is the sacrifice that you're looking at creatively in the future that you'll have to figure out if you really think that going
Yep.
to Israel.
That's right.
So
That's right.
all those things, problem solving, really. It's problem solving really unique problems.
Yeah. It's problem solving in real time, always a new set of problems. But when you have people that can put their heads together and figure out the best way, the problems aren't really that difficult if you think about it. I think what it is it's the time pressure. It's ego sometimes that really gets in the way. It's like, again, are you doing this in service of the story? And some people may mask that as a yes, but really they're thinking about themselves oftentimes, or the perception of self, or I don't know. There's just like a lot of that happens in our industry, unfortunately. So you have to really be able to extract the real anchor to something. And when you do, like, it is worthwhile, because you can be in these heated sort of creative conversations about how you're going to achieve XYZ. But again, as long as everyone is like rowing in the same direction, then it's a worthwhile heated conversation to have to figure out all of the things. Like when you were like, we need to get an airplane, we need to get a private plane, we got to shoot Shyne coming, like all of this stuff, it's like, okay, like I see the value of that creatively. I understand that this is super important to the story. So yes, we're going to go the distance to figure out. We're going to talk to every single person that owns a small plane in Belize, and we're going to figure out how to get us in one of those. It's just what we got to do, period. Like, but if you were like, it would just be cool to do that just because I really want to, it's like, nah, that would have been a different ask. Again, is it in service of the story? And I think when everyone is in that same mindset, challenges aside, because they will exist, then that's when you can yield the best results. And that's when I think you can net out into a premium documentary that looks and feels like this,
That's right. That's right. We got to shout out Jason Perez.
Jason Perez, all right, who is my soursap buddy.
What's the
Listen,
silence?
Jason is a whole podcast onto itself. I know he's a longtime partner of yours, and you really fought to bring him onto the team. And it was really important. I think when you have a director who has a right hand person that you speak this language, and Jason had also come up in production, like it just makes the difference to have people you can trust on the inside that have your best interests at heart. And you guys also have a deep friendship, and so you are the blood brothers. You guys are super cute. You're little two peas in a pod. And it was dope. It was dope. It was cool to like learn a lot from you guys and just get to be the little sister no one asked for. I always like to joke because like Jason was the brother I never asked for but had to deal with. He's a strong Latino man, and I am a strong Latina woman. So naturally, some headbutting was bound to happen, but all towards, again, the mission and the vision of what we were building. So, all in the best interest of how we want to raise our baby.
He's a great dude. He's been in the industry for a very long time. Also came up under in the Spike camp,
Yeah,
and been working with me, and I've been working with him as a creative producer for a long time. And so sometimes he has to come over and say, "Yo, my man, I know you want to be on a plane with the this and the that, but like we can't really do that." Like he'll level with me in a way where I gotta have to reassess while still trying to problem solve.
that's right.
Uh, yeah, but super well versed in the industry and making films. So
And just like knows everybody, just he's also got a really bright spirit and just is a fun, delightful person most of the time because no one's
super
perfect.
charismatic, incredibly well connected. He made a lot of
Yeah,
connections. And, in New York City, a lot of the people we needed to get to. He's
that's
very
right.
good at opening doors, getting people to say yes, and finding people. To be honest, he's got
Yeah,
an
for sure.
incredible.
I mean, look, all the stuff we did in Brooklyn, from the doc portion to the recrees, like shout out to Jason Perez. Like we wouldn't have gotten the caliber of everything fill in the blank if it had not been for him and his deep relationships there. It's a tiny budget doc, even though it's like, yeah, it's Antscape, it's Disney. People think we're rolling in money. As everybody knows, nobody's rolling in the dough, and budgets keep getting compressed and compressed. And so to be able to rally and bring people on again for the passion of the relationships or the story, it was really special. And I always like to see when people just come out and they're like, I've known this person for 15 years. We've been grinding since we were PAs, like it's again a testament to the value of relationships. So yeah, so it was, now we can
Also super important as a producer. Relationships. It's a huge.
100%. We talk about this all the time. It's the relationships you have are the people that's why as you're starting out as a PA, your ability to network across people you make deep relationships with are the people that in 5-10 years, as everyone escalates, are going to call you, are going to think of you because they were impressed by how forward you were and how ahead of whatever it is that you were. People are always paying attention on set, but certainly like the way that you can sustain those relationships and water those seeds that you've planted with people over the years matters. And similarly, like I had relationships with vendors and partners that I was able to dip into and get us like insane deals on things that we probably would not have gotten, because I've also been around for a hot minute. So it's just like collectively, it's not just one of us. It's like collectively, we all contribute to the ecosystem that is, again, the North Star of how do we tell the best story? What is in service of the story within the scope of what we have to play with and the tools that we have to make it? How do we make the best film possible?
100%.
And we did. So
We did.
you know
Do we have any days left for Shine? Can we still shoot something or what?
I do think we do, actually. We ended up with a couple of days.
We had a day or two left in the budget. We could have shot something
Yeah,
else.
we can. We should. Maybe we should redo this podcast with the camera budget. Just kidding. Just kidding. But no, thank you for taking the time to be here. This is so cool, so special to just have a little like trip down memory lane of something that was such a big part of our lives for a couple of years. Obviously got to see you for a hot second in New York back in November when we had the premiere, but it was just crazy because that was literally a year after we stepped off set and I hadn't seen you in that entire year. Like we literally got off of a van at 5 a.m. whenever we wrapped from doing those overnights with all the recre stuff. And then I didn't see you again until the premiere. And in that whole time in between, I had a baby, which is the other part I didn't even talk about, was that during the fall, when we were doing some of our hardest stuff, I was in my first trimester of my pregnancy, and I didn't want anyone to know because I didn't want you guys to worry, frankly, because I was okay. You know, I was feeling good. I had a lot of energy. I was on the Peloton when we would come back from the shoot, you know, because I'm a crazy person. But it certainly, now looking back, it's like, there was obviously a much bigger challenge for me because my energy was so depleted, and I just didn't really notice at the time because I'm so used to, like, I came up in that grind of production where it's like, you just do, it doesn't matter. You got 4 hours of sleep. That's not anybody's problem. That's your problem. Like, that's a you problem. You got to still show up at 4:30 and solve problems, you know? And I'm really of that school. And so for me, it was like, nobody needs to be thinking about this or worried about this because we're here to like do the hardest part of our shoot, frankly. Logistically hardest. There were obviously a ton of other hards, but yeah, so that was crazy, you know, life. And now my son is 8 months old. So
Wow.
yeah,
Congratulations. You did it.
I
You
did
did it.
it.
You
I
tell him that he was
birthed,
on set at the time. He was
listen,
on
I
set. Of
birthed a doc and a human being all in one. Well, sir, it's been a pleasure and a delight. Thank you so much for taking the time. I really appreciate it.
course. Thanks for having me. I feel like I'm in good company.
You are in
Appreciate
good
it.
company. You are in good company. Okay, 5 fun questions to take us out. So this is the martini round. What's a song that teleports you to a happy place?
That's gotta be something from the Marley category. Something from Bob Marley's category.
Okay. What's the latest piece of art that moved you? A book, a film, a show, anything?
I'm gonna go with Disclaimer. It's a series that I saw recently that was like mind blowing, really well done storytelling, super unconventional, very cool narrative storytelling.
Narrative. Fill in the blank. When I'm overworked, blank helps ease the stress.
Vacation, travel, personal travel. I'm a big fan of travel.
Ibiza?
You know, Ibiza. You know, South America, the Caribbean. Travel,
Travel.
vacation, international travel, the beach. Done.
Yes, done. Okay. What is one of the most worthwhile investments you've ever made? And it doesn't have to be financial.
For me, it was taking the risk of moving from New York to LA. It was a huge risk. I don't really have family in LA, but I was at that point in my career. I knew where, I knew
Mhm.
where the decisions were made. I knew LA was closer to the industry. So moving cross country, moving myself to Los Angeles in 2019.
Just in time for the pandemic. My goodness.
1 year before the pandemic.
I know. You did it. What's one failure you wouldn't be here without?
Failure. I did reality TV once as a director. I was directing a reality TV show. People can figure out which one that is. And I did not have a very good relationship with the DP at that time. And as a result of that, I forced myself to learn a lot more about camera, like the actual workings of the camera and what I can do and what I can't do. I started shooting some stuff myself. So it wasn't necessarily a failure, but it was not a good ending to a production experience, but it caused me to brush up on different set of skills, which is I need to know how the cameras work inside and out. I need to shoot some stuff myself. I need to know what the limitations are. La, la, la.
I love it. Well, amazing. You did it. You made it through the martini.
That's it. All
That's
right.
it. Aliens. Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. 100%.
100%. And of course, there's the UFO episode on Solved Mysteries. But so I've spoken to a lot of, interviewed a lot of people in depth about their experiences. 100% without question.
Well, we're going to leave you with that. So thank you
All
so
right.
much. This was
Carolina,
lovely.
thank you.
Thank you,
Appreciate
sir.
it.
Appreciate it.